We wanted to ask you some questions about some of the things that are going on.
Yes.
And one of the things that have really kind of raised the ire of people around here is the Amboy Bridge.
Yes. Yes.
Much needed
Yes.
repair.
Yes.
But people are concerned about the detours. There's
Yes.
some businesses affected. Could you give us an update?
Heavens, yes. In fact, I've been out to Kingsville twice in the last couple of weeks.
Okay.
In fact, the last meeting that we had last week was a result of an earlier meeting I had with the District 4 supervisor, district supervisor, to come back out and explain some of the things. First of all, there's some background information that people need to know.
Okay.
That bridge, what year do you think that was built? Take a wild guess.
Early 1900s?
Well, 1940.
Was it
1940. In fact, I saw the paperwork, the permits and such, and the plans were done in the 1930s. And I looked down, and I think it might have even been like a WPA project or something.
Okay.
I can't prove it, but it had the fingerprints of that. Bottom line is, the average age of a bridge is 50 years. And next year, we're going on the 75th anniversary of the construction. So that's one thing. It is
Has
old.
it ever been fixed? Or
Well, yeah, there have been some back in the 70s and again in the 80s. But I walked underneath that the other day prior to the meeting in North Kingsville to check it out.
Okay.
And there was severe spalling on the support columns. There is a section there. It appears to be sagging. Some of the cement has fallen away underneath, and it definitely needs some repairs. And the worst thing that could happen is that thing has a problem, and then we have to close it without being proactive in terms of fixing it. So we all know it needs to be done. That's bottom line. There's a second thing that people need to realize too. The interstate bridges, when they close, because we've had this come to our attention, well, why don't we just close one lane and put a couple of lights on each end and keep half the bridge open?
okay.
Makes sense,
Yeah.
doesn't it? Because we see that over I-90 or bridges like that. There's a problem with that. The bridges that they are able to keep open, halfway open, the support beams run parallel underneath the bridge deck itself. So if you imagine, say, the Route 7 bridge over Route 90, if 7 runs this way, the support columns are parallel to that. So you can close half of it down because you're not losing any support. You still have the main beams underneath. This bridge, the way it was designed, you know the railroad cuts through there diagonally.
Right.
That's the way the support beams also follow underneath. If you go down and look at it, and it's not even a 45 degree, it's a 19-degree angle, which means that if we have the bridge, if this is Route 20 going east and west, and these are the supports underneath of it, you can't take half of it down. The whole thing has to go, because typically the supports would run like this. Instead, they're almost perpendicular. So that was one of the original suggestions, that we just close half, close half of it down and keep it open. Not an option, come to find out.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Dennis from Sheffield
Yes.
called in and said, is there an option as far as, do you need to replace the bridge? Can you just...
They looked at tunneling, and there are some issues there. We really need to raise the bridges. The railroads are going to double stacking on their cars, and that one needs to be raised, oh my gosh, a foot or two, and that's variable as well, because when they replace the ballast underneath, sometimes that varies when they put new rocks and such, new ties. So there has to be some clearance there. And with the double stacking, the railroad's moving more and more in that direction. Then we have grade issues. If we're going to dig that out to build over, then we have to start a little bit further back down the track, because there is engineering, very serious engineering, that goes into place when we're looking at railroads, because they have to be fuel efficient. ODOT also examined the possibility of a tunnel underneath of it. But that's problematic as well because of the cost and the time factor. So what we have here is an aging structure that has to be closed down. And what they're doing is their thinking is they're going to eliminate, you know, the gaps underneath the bridge where there's columns, backfill those in and have a shorter span but a higher span. Now, where we are today, the railroad, there is a possibility for, and this is going to take a huge lift, and we shouldn't get our hopes up because reality says it's not going to happen, but we're going to try. Safety crossing there. There is that road to the south in, oh my
Industry
gosh.
Drive?
Yes, yes. And I walked back through there the other day as well. It would need to be upgraded, and we need a grade crossing. The problem with that is we're dealing with the federal government and the railroad industry, and they're very, very reluctant to put in a crossing such as that because now, unless you put in the gates, and I know it could be done, it could be expensive, but I don't know if A, we have the time, or B, we're going to get the permission, but we're going to pursue it anyway. We're going to pursue it anyway until all the options are exhausted. And I'll be in touch, our office is going to be in touch with the ODOT supervisor of the railroads. And I know Greg Sweet's been in touch with the railroad himself, Norfolk and Southern. And we'll see what we can do. We'll try. And until we hit the brick wall, we're going to pursue that option.
Well, he kind of hinted that this particular project could close his business down, which would be North Kingsville, Greg Sweet.
Yes.
Now, I don't know. They are talking detours, and that's another thing that has kind of got people a little concerned too, John, is Creek Road's going to take some, and I noticed Mark Coppola was at that meeting.
Yes.
And said that, you know, we can't afford to pay a lot of money in repairs.
Right.
You have Creek Road, you have Gore Road.
And those are essentially the two
That's
that local people would use. Now the official state detour, I saw that route. It's on Route 90 and around. They actually loop people down and around and back up to 193. And my question to ODOT was, what would you do if there's an incident on 90 where that's closed down? We're going to have to be looking at alternatives there too. Now, here's what ODOT has assured us, that they would actually come out, look at the road before, and take grade level pictures and that sort of thing, and determine what kind of shape it was in.
Okay.
And then as it gets beat up, they would actually replace it. But the problem is, some of those roads are in such bad shape now because of the winter. No fault of anybody, just because of the winter.
Right.
That to bring them back to shape, to where they are now, isn't a possibility either. So I suggested to ODOT, go out at this point, if that's what we have to do, fix them, bring them up to speed where we want them to be. The investment in that would probably be less than the repairs that we do down the road. Pardon the pun. But you got that, good. Don't mean to stall out on you. But point of the matter is, we need to be proactive in those detours as well. So ODOT was open to that suggestion too. Bring them up to speed, make sure we're ready to go, and then partner with the townships to move in that direction.
I had a guy mention to me the other day, he goes, you know, we closed off Route 20 with a viaduct, this one over here that you just came across.
Yes.
And there was no problem. I go, but you're not remembering that you had Old Main Road as the detour site that worked in tandem, basically. I mean, you go down Old Main Road, you come up, and it took you right beyond that bridge.
Right.
And that's how I worked it when I was going back and forth to the east side. I said, that's the whole different ball game. This is different here.
The railroad is what complicates it.
Yes. Yeah.
And yet we know the bridge needs to be fixed. So
it has to be fixed.
We're in an awkward situation.
And you know, John, we've been waiting for years.
I know.
For this to even happen, and I'm kind of surprised that now people are kind of griping that this isn't right and blah blah blah. Well, we need to get that fixed. It is a safety hazard right now.
And that's why we've taken the lead to be proactive in the whole process, because the bids are going to be let out this fall, late fall, November.
In November,
so,
yeah.
And they want to get started early next year. So it's not too late to make tweaks, but the bottom line is that thing's coming out. Now here's something else that I didn't realize. They showed the engineering drawings.
Okay.
And because that bridge is not only going to be a little bit more humped, but because it cuts at an angle across that particular railroad, again that 19-degree angle, there are some tension factors that make this bridge a very complicated design too.
Oh.
And the point of the matter is, the bridge that exists out there now has to face the same sort of tension factors. If something would happen to that, and this is my concern, where we would have to close it this afternoon, we don't have a backup plan. I mean, we would design one, but it would be even more disastrous as it compared to being proactive in this whole approach.
Now, two things. First of all, one of the concerns from some of the residents was, and I'm probably at your meetings, if there's a fire or if there's an emergency situation, how are they going to get to those spots and not lose a lot of time?
And that's an issue we're going to have to face. Greg Sweet actually drove the routes, and there is a difference in time there.
Is it?
In 3 minutes, 4 minutes, it doesn't sound like much, but in a life or death situation, it is. And we're going to have to work through that. And again, I come back to the fact that's where we need to put pressure on the railroads to at least have an emergency crossing there if need be.
Yeah.
But again, we can't guarantee that's going to happen. I'm just being upfront with everybody. We'll try our best, but there are some things that are beyond our pay grade.
I know. You know, I've asked Tim this, our city manager, and he wasn't sure last time I interviewed him, which was just, I think, last week. The length of this project, first it was 6 months, now it's possibly a year. Do you know any insight?
Yeah. There's some creative ways of going about this. And it kind of ties in with, in principle, with the ODOT project this summer that's going in on Lake Road in between Geneva on the Lake and Asheville. That is another potential headache, but it too has to be done. ODOT's looking to incentivize the contractor, whoever does get that, to build the project in a shorter period of time.
Oh.
And that came up in the meeting the other day. We could have a baseline, say that instead of 300 days, that we could whittle that down to 280, for example. But for every day under 280 they came, there would be more money for them.
I have not heard that.
Okay. At the other end, if they go over the magical date, they would be penalized. Now, there's some factors to consider here. We could have them working 24/7, 7 days a week. Makes sense to us, doesn't it? But there were some people who lived down there, and they were not too keen on the idea, and I can't blame them, of all that traffic, all that work, when they're trying to sleep. So we have to be very cognizant of the people who live close to that project too, as to how much in the fast lane we get this going. They could work 8-10 hours a day, 7 days a week. They could work 16 hours a day, 5-6 days a week.
Yeah.
But we can shave some of that time down. But again, there are limitations in terms of noise and traffic, that sort of thing. So my point is, we're working closely with ODOT to examine all of those options as it comes forth, knowing that it has to be done, knowing that there is no perfect solution, but we're just looking for the best solution. And it may not be the best for everybody, but the best that can be done, given all the constraints.
Well, I know you've just given us more information than I thought we would have at this point. There's still some unanswered questions, obviously.
The railroad is the unanswered question, because if we can open that even for a safety crossing, it takes away the worries that we have about access, especially to Brown and some of those safety vehicles. So I am definitely concerned about that.
You know, if you think about it, and I've lived here all my life, I never paid attention to those trains underneath that bridge. You know, I guess, is it kind of like a yard down there? Is it?
Well, there are two tracks. One, essentially, as I understand it now, is a siding. The other is the main track. But I'm sure in an emergency situation they could crank up both of those,
right?
If they needed to. but there's significant train traffic through there, and we need that. I mean, that's the economic development that keeps our region and our nation going. We can't close down the railroads.
Right. Interesting stuff. I'm glad.
Nothing's ever simple, is it?
It never is. It never is.
So we'll keep working at it.
Well,
And I want you to know, as soon as we're able to schedule the meeting with the ODOT railroad people up here in probably in the North Kingsville Town Hall, because we've been working closely with Terry to schedule that. We'll make sure that the word gets out so that people can have their questions answered.
Please do, because they did have a meeting here, I believe, prior to the North Kingsville one, and there was some talk about having another hearing. I didn't know if it was going to be here in North Kingsville or where, but people have to come out, and if they have questions, now's the time to ask them.
Right. Total transparency, and they need to know. For example, that was my first thought was we'll close half of it down. Well, I didn't realize until I had talked with the engineers. Knowledge is power, and the more open that we can be in terms of sharing concrete information with people, the more they'll be able to understand it's a difficult situation. We all have to be a little flexible.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting stuff. Interesting. John, I did read that the tourist informational, which I just went by the other day, is going to reopen seasonally, in a seasonal way.
That's correct.
May 1st, I believe.
Yeah, first part of May. Again, that was another one of our conversations that we had with the District 4 district supervisor. And it's going to be the same sort of scenario as last year. There'll be a person there through the tourist season. And I know Phil Garcia is always calling me, and I love Phil, to see if we can get that the way it used to be.
Right.
Reality is, given the funding, it's probably not in the foreseeable future, but we'll take whatever we can get. And anything's better than nothing. So that's going to be open again.
It's still a beautiful building.
It is, and they understand that. And there's some problems in terms of staffing that. It does need somebody there as it used to be, and I understand
so.
that.
Yeah.
But I think once the construction is totally complete, and by the way, when that's complete, we're also working with Connie Naylor and ODOT in terms of signage and such.
Yes.
That's been on hold because of the construction project. I think as we are able to stimulate, again, tourism with the area being completed, the construction, and we get more people there, that will be able to make a stronger argument to open that full time again. It's just been it was the perfect storm of things to happen in a negative way. So I've not lost sight of that, and Phil, I'll keep working on that. But the reality is, for this summer, again, it's going to be a part-time position.
Always boils down to money.
It does. It does.
That's what it's all about. John, there's some other local projects there that I wanted you to talk about. Would you hit on some of those things that are going on?
Some very important things happening this weekend. There are 2 health fairs taking place, and then there's going to be another one May 10th. It's on a Saturday. And let me explain why health fairs are important, then I'll give you the nuts and bolts of these. If we are going to move forward and try to create an environment to attract business and industry, what's the number one thing they're going to be looking for? Oh, a workforce. I mean, if you don't have the people, you're not going to bring the business and industry.
Right.
Well, I think we have a workforce, but I was looking at the study in terms of our overall health compared to other counties. Geauga County, according to this one study that was released recently, I'm sure you read about that in the paper, Geauga County is #1 in the state in terms of health. People live longer, they have less disease, they have a better mental outlook. Out of the 88 counties in the state of Ohio, Asheville is number 63.
Really?
So we have issues, and I want to explain to that. My point is, we have to get healthy. If we're going to move forward with economic development, if we're going to attract business and industry, We have to be healthy first. We have to be educated. We have to be willing to work. But my dad was a chiropractor for years, and he always told me, Johnny, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know you've been having some dental issues.
Right.
And it's caused you to eat differently.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably gotten you up at night. You're not sleeping well compared to before.
Right.
My point is, something simple as dental, it's never that simple, but if we don't have our health, we can't perform to our maximum capability.
Right.
So, what issues do we have? We have obesity problems in Asheville County. We have diabetic problems. We have geriatric issues. We are an aging county. And on top of that, it's something simple. We have a vitamin D deficiency here. Vitamin D deficiency?
Big time.
Why is that?
No sun.
No sun. And that's a product of being the lake. The lake giveth, the lake also taketh away. So we need to be able, and that affects our mental outlook. Mm-hmm. We need to be able to address head on the health issues that we have and start to prepare as a group, as a county, to move forward. I also have my Lyme disease people are going to be there, so as to help educate people. So here's what's going to happen. Knowing that, we have to get healthy. This Saturday at Kent State Asheville, and this is absolutely free. Kent State Asheville from 10 to 12, I've co-sponsored with ACMC to bring in a whole host of individuals in the healthcare industry on their staff to set up stations where people can walk in, walk by, get tested for various ailments that they might have, get information as to how to be proactive in terms of their health. The idea is to educate all of us as to how we might get healthier. I know myself, I put on 9-10 pounds since I've been in office because it's a weird schedule that I keep. Mm-hmm. I got to get some weight off. I got to get more exercise.
Well, you're probably on that, what do they call it, the circuit too, where you always go to dinners and stuff. That's part of being a politician too.
Yeah, it is. And when I'm in Columbus, I might eat in the morning and not eat again a full meal until that night, and maybe 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then it's Gorge City. And that's not good either. Yeah. And then there's a little bit of stress that goes with this, because instead of worrying about 200 kids every day as I used to in the classroom, I worry about 115,000 kids, if you will. Bottom line is, I have to get healthier myself. So Kent State Asheville this Saturday, the 26th, from 10 to 12, absolutely free. St. Joseph in Andover, for our southern viewers, is also having a health fair this Saturday, and I'm not sure about the hours. I was just told through an email that they also were having one, but they can check that out through St. Joe's. Oh. And then University Hospital is having one May 10th for women.
Yes, it's an expo for women.
Yes, and that's critically important. Mm-hmm. So again, it's something we have to do. And I also know that we have opiate issues in the county, the drug issue. We have to start addressing that, and that's a whole different show that we can get into. But I'm talking about basic health that we need to address.
I do want to address this, John. We were talking about jobs. We need a workforce.
Yes.
And I talked to a guy that is an expert in that field of getting people employed. He says, unfortunately, there's not a lot of people to pick from, because a lot of them are on drugs.
Yes.
Or they will not come forward and want to take a drug test. Right. That's scary. And then my sister-in-law is in town from Texas, and she lives in a town called Georgetown, Texas, which she said is with older people. And she goes, but I noticed here, and she's been away for a while, she goes, I noticed here this town seems a little bit old. And I go, I think it probably is.
Yes.
You know? And I go, I don't know what the answer to that is. Because we're not going to have that workforce. We're not going to be able to get, people are just trying to get by. And,
right.
You know, how do you come out of that hole, John?
It is, again, a complex question. And this is one of the things that keeps me up late at night and early in the morning. For one thing, the News Herald. In fact, Congressman Joyce and I were talking about that Saturday. It was in Geauga County. There was the Maple Syrup Hall of Fame induction. Cool. Wonderful for Geauga County. But we were talking about the News Herald that day, front page, opiate issues.
Right.
And it's not just here, it's statewide. Last summer I was on a special committee, task force to look at opiate addiction and prescription drug addiction. Did I tell you about this?
Mm-mm.
We traveled throughout the state, and time after time, it wasn't just the young people, it was older people. And let me explain to you how this happens in some instances. Older people go in to have a hip replacement or knee surgery,
okay.
Something that, very serious things that would require some painkillers.
Sure.
Okay? So they get prescribed their medication, they start taking it, and they get addicted. They run through their prescriptions, and then we found a number of the people who came forward, and that's just the ones who were willing to volunteer this information, went doctor shopping out of state to continue to get their prescriptions, and then when that ran out, still addicted to opioids, what do you suppose they went to buy? If you're addicted and you need it, and you can't get drugs that are prescribed, heroin.
No kidding.
Heroin. The heroin epidemic cuts across all socioeconomic backgrounds, cuts across chronological backgrounds.
And we're talking older people?
Older people, grandparents and such. We had a nurse with 3 kids, a single mom, had some surgery, got addicted, and she said, this is the lowest point in my career. Keep in mind, she was responsible for these kids. She said, I threw myself down the stairs so I would purposely get injured. So I could go to the emergency room and they would prescribe, she knew that they would prescribe painkillers for her.
Oh,
she got addicted. The issue is, and think about this, when you watch the evening news, all the advertisements that promote an easy pill for something. Now, there's a balance between smart health and not wanting any pain. And you know what I'm talking about. You watch the news, you see the drug
all the
companies.
time. Yeah.
Well, the problem is we have, in the pharmaceuticals and the medical industry is working with us in the legislature here, we've overprescribed. And as a result, some of these painkillers are addictive, and it's hard to wean people off. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be, again, a complex issue forward to address that problem. Right. But because of that, the heroin industry has moved in, and some of our younger people who don't get addicted through painkillers and such. And by the way, we're having a medicine at the healthcare medicine drop-off center where you can get rid of those meds. We also heard stories of kids raiding their parents' and grandparents' medicine cabinets just to see what was in there.
Oh yeah.
And getting addicted.
We've had that here.
But then they go into heroin, and the epidemic is rampant. So it's a multi-pronged effort that we have to make. Awareness is the first thing, education, and then we have to start making those steps. And we have about 12, 15 pieces of legislation working through, and I'll give you an example of one. I know we need to take a
call
break.
real quick.
Okay.
Hi, you're on the air.
Yeah, I got a question, Pat. We got loose dogs in my neighborhood. We got a dog that's loose in my neighborhood. It's a brown dog, and it looks like a pit bull.
All right.
And I want to ask him, what is he going to do about the leash laws in this town?
About the what?
Leash law.
The law that the dogs have to be on a leash when they're out, instead of running the neighborhood.
Okay. All right. Hang up and we'll get an answer for you. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Leash laws are a local issue.
Yeah.
Not a state issue.
He doesn't handle that end of the deal.
And it's better left up to the local individual, because we could really mess that up at the state level. But here's an example of an opiate piece of legislation that made its way through. Children, parents at home, underage, go to a doctor.
Yeah.
Patient, doctor, privacy. Okay?
Absolutely.
We did not realize that a doctor could prescribe painkillers to that underage individual without parental consultation. It was legal to do that. So one of the laws that we passed recently, and I think it's over in the Senate now, and the governor may be close to signing it in, is to require parental notification if such a prescription is going to take place. I mean, that just was common sense.
Well, isn't it, John, like if they put you on a painkiller, and I might need some when I have this surgery, you only are supposed to take it for like a week and then get off of it. I mean, are they getting refills or?
Yes, yes, because as we understand it now, I can't vouch for that. Never been down that road.
Right.
But as
Neither
I
have I.
understand it, some people enjoy, bad term to use, get hooked on that feeling of no pain, and it becomes so powerful. Because remember, the base root in this is an opioid, and it just kind of sucks them in. It's not everybody, but it's enough that it's a problem.
Okay.
So
Interesting stuff.
each person's physiology is a little bit different, and some are more susceptible than others.
We're getting a phone call. We'll take that real quick. Hi, you're on the air.
Pat, it's PT.
Hi, PT.
How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, good.
Good.
Good to see the sun shining. But I've got a little thought that I'd like to run by John.
Sure.
At least food for thought. I'm 73 years old, and throughout my lifetime, all I have ever heard, and it was from a relative, about the World War II, World War I, et cetera, and how good the Seabees were as far as their construction and so on and so forth, and the ability to do things and make places feasible to get to and so on. And what I'm getting to is this, make a long story short. Has anybody looked into the possibility of creating a temporary facility, a temporary bridge up there at that bridge site that they're going to replace? I would think that would be something they could look at. And let's bring our government to bear into this thing, and get some advantages and some benefits from all the years and so on that we've paid into the Corps of Engineers and everything. They're engineers. They got brains. They can do stuff like this. And I just think it might be feasible to do that rather than tear up roads and spend money and tick people off by going through neighborhoods and whatever. I just think that they could go down Industry Boulevard and make some kind of a diagonal, even though it's a two-lane structure down there with hydraulic decks and whatever that they have sitting in yards elsewhere, or I mean around the world, around the country. I just think it ought to be looked into, and I don't think it's that far-fetched to think about that. But I'll just, see what's thought of it and see what he thinks. And,
Okay.
all right?
All right. Thanks, PT.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Interesting. And PT, I want to thank you for your reference to the Seabees. My father-in-law was a Seabee during World War II, and can do.
I don't know whether do they still have CVs? I don't know.
I'm not sure.
I don't know.
It's a federal thing, but he took great pride. He was up in the Aleutians. Of course, we were concerned about Japanese invasion, and then later, towards the end of the war, concerned about the Soviets. But the concept of an alternative bridge also was examined.
Right.
There are two factors with respect to that. One is the relocation of Route 20. The way that is situated, now Industry Boulevard is an option. It's kind of a strange configuration the way it's laid out, but it could be done potentially. Again, we come back to the railroads and their interests there. The other issue is the right-of-way. And if we're going to build a temporary bridge, we need the right-of-way or an easement to do just that. And that adds to the cost. Okay. And I know ODOT has examined that. That came up. Now, it's maybe that still be, and again, that's one of the things we could pursue until exhaustion. But even for, I've heard some estimates for a temporary railroad crossing, anywhere from $100,000 up to $400,000 to meet grade by the time you pay for everything. And then the engineer of the project, not the one in the
Right.
trade, mentioned that when that is open, if it does not have gates, then you have to have flaggers there. And there are specified times, and then it adds up in terms of money, even to move material or equipment from one side of the bridge to the other across the track. So it's a moving target, and I understand the concept, but it's right away in the way that it's positioned in the cost.
John, I'm trying to think. Industry Drive,
Mm-hmm.
that goes to the...
It's a dog leg. It goes to the south, crosses the track, and then it comes back
Right.
down by the business that's located there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it is two-lane. PT's absolutely right.
Is it two-lane? I was
Just
thinking it was just
two-lane.
one.
Yeah. Well, it's a narrow two.
Okay.
It would be a great one.
Um,
But that would have to be upgraded too. To handle some of the traffic
Yeah,
that we're
yeah.
asking.
what about, is there another street or road down below the bridge?
There's one to the north too.
To the
There's
north
also-
that led you to the old landfill in the old days, many,
Yeah.
many years ago.
Right, right. And
I
there
can't
again,
remember.
you're talking about right-of-ways and easements to the east side of the bridge.
Yeah.
There's a house or two back in there.
Yeah, right. Wow.
That's why we're talking about this now, to exhaust all options.
Yeah, instead of waiting till the last
Mhm.
minute.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
We just have to do something.
Um,
I appreciate the call.
yeah, very good. Thanks, PT. Good
Mhm.
idea.
Good catch.
The Lyme disease
Yes.
issue. You were very
Passionate,
active
yes.
and passionate about it.
Yes.
And we are going into the season. I have a problem with mosquitoes and
Mhm.
bugs and stuff. That when I'm sitting out at night, I'm usually go right in the house because I don't want to get bit by these things and itch all night and possibly get sick. Now, Lyme's disease is caused by ticks.
Deer tick, yeah.
And we have a lot of deer in our neighborhood. We're
Yes.
right at an old golf course that's been abandoned. And we watch our dog constantly, make sure she doesn't get ticks from being outside. John, I have known some people that have had Lyme disease, and they get very, very
Yes.
sick.
Yes.
And I had a caller one day, it was Dennis, I believe, that said there's a bigger things to talk about than that. Actually, Lyme disease is a major health issue.
It's the sixth fastest growing disease in the United States,
Is it really?
according to the CDC. And that's of the cases that we can document. And that's the problem with Lyme. It can be misdiagnosed. And part of the legislation, and it did pass out of the House that I worked on for over a year, it's over in the Senate now, would require at the time of a blood draw, if a dentist or a physician's assistant or if a physician's even suspected Lyme, and we did a blood draw, that you would be notified, basically a written notification, that your test, and here's where we have a problem with CDC, the test can come back false positive, it can come back false negative. And by that it means the test might reveal that you have Lyme disease when you may not.
Right.
Or it might reveal that you don't have Lyme disease and you do. The testing is still faulty. What this does, the notification, it puts you on notice that if you're still experiencing Lyme-like symptoms, and there are a number of them, it could be a common cold, it could be fever, it could be aches and pains, that you should have additional tests done, that you're not out of the woods. The problem is some of this has been so misdiagnosed that it goes undetected, and then we have serious problems. And there's a lot of education that has to be done in the health field with citizens. just so we know what we're talking about here. And even with the CDC, I have a resolution that's been introduced, waiting to go through committee, urging the CDC to be more active in terms of research, reporting, that sort of thing. In this bill that was passed recently, there's also $650,000 tucked away in there for a tick testing center, so that if you had a tick that you thought that you were able to get out of your body,
Right.
or your pet, we could send that to Columbus, the Ohio Department of Health. The veterinarians would do the same.
Right.
They would test, see if that tick carried Lyme disease. Some of them do, some of them don't. And then we would let you know, hey, this tick tested positive, you better get yourself to a doctor. What I would like to do ultimately is to educate our hunters, our outdoors people, anybody, hikers, bikers, and when I say biking, like the bike track,
Right.
that if they find a tick, locate themselves in their cell phones. As they send that away and it comes back positive, we can use those coordinates to build a scatter plot map so that we can find out where the hot spots are. So if I'm Pat Williams and I live in Conneaut and I want to go hiking in the woods over by Amboy, oh, that's a hot spot. I better be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going down to Dorset to go fishing in a pond. Oh no, but nothing's been reported there. So I don't have to be quite as on my toes.
One of the questions here, are all ticks, and I think you might have addressed that a little bit there, are all ticks, even if, say if a tick bites your dog or
Right.
bites you or I,
Mm-hmm.
they don't all have that
No.
disease,
No,
right?
that's correct. That's
So
correct.
there's where the tricky part enters the game here.
That's right. It's a variable.
See, everybody was telling me, oh, you get bit by a tick, you're done.
No.
No, that's not the case.
No, no. And the thing of it is, there are different concentrations of ticks too.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
one area, and this is why back in December, Dr. Needham from Ohio State, an entomologist, he's made a living off ticks and bed bugs. He'd be a fascinating guy to get up there
Yeah.
sometime. But we walked the sand barrens looking for ticks there because it's a hot spot. The wonderful lady who lives across the street, some guy named Mr. Simpson, used to teach at Conneaut, quiet, shy, reserved. His sister.
Okay.
You know
Yeah.
Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, I do.
The voice of the Conneaut Spartans. I just love that man.
Oh, David, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the point of the matter is, her dogs go over there, and she's taken hot ticks off from those dogs because we knew it was a spot where A, there are ticks, and B, they carry Lyme. So there are places where you won't find ticks. Then there'll be places where you'll find ticks, but they're not Lyme carriers, and then you'll find places that there are ticks and they carry Lyme. So it's a strange, and it's not linear. It's just random, and that's why this scatter plot map is so important. So we know exactly where these hotspots are.
You know, I mentioned mosquitoes earlier,
Yeah.
and that is another
Yes,
problem.
West Nile is an issue.
West Nile.
Yeah, yeah. And
You
the
got to be
reports of
very
that
careful
all
with
the
that
time.
too. So nothing to mess around with. Check your dogs, especially if they're outside. If you're outside, check yourself. They say if you're outside, to take a shower and examine yourself to see if you have any kind of symptoms
Exactly.
of ticks.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is from Jim. What is the most important issue facing Ohio, Ashtabula County, and how would you address it?
Oh my goodness, that's a doctoral dissertation, and I love it. Obviously, number one is jobs and economic development, so that we can provide jobs for people. And Pat, that you speak about an aging community. If we can create, and that's my mission, to create the conditions to attract business and industry, and let them, business and industry, do its thing to hire people of all ages.
Right.
Then we'll have a bigger tax base. We'll be able to pave the streets in Conneaut. We'll be able to take care of garbage issues and leash laws and things like that. Do a better job.
Mm-hmm.
But the tax base is eroded because we don't have jobs. We've lost our young people because we don't have jobs. And and I think it's psychological too. Young people bring energy to the table, and you know yourself. I always felt when I was teaching, man, I could be kind of listless, but go in front of a classroom with kids, and the energy level just bubbles up. You know, when you're in Columbus, for example, and it's a younger city, there's vitality there. There's a sense of purpose, movement, and that springs from those younger generations. They're raising kids. They're going to PTA. They're having Little League, that sort of thing. My point is, think of all the young children over the years, go back 40 years now, that we have lost elsewhere because of the lack of jobs here. So I get that. We didn't get in this overnight. We're not going to get out overnight. But it all comes back to job creation. And with that, and here's something else, and this centers into family values too. When you grew up, it's not just jobs, it's jobs with a living wage. When you grew up, I would imagine your dad worked and your mom stayed home.
Oh yeah.
Same thing here. And most of the kids in the neighborhood, because it was possible to live off one income in those days.
And you only had one car.
One car, and the houses were smaller. We had a little bit more reasonable expectations. So it's a balance of that. Again, a complex picture. But if you got into trouble in somebody else's backyard, your mom found out about it. There was a network of families. Well, if we can bring our young people back, if we can have decent paying jobs, and then we have to worry about the expectation thing, we have to fine tune as well. My thinking is that we can strengthen families by one parent or the other, doesn't matter which one, staying at home more often to help raise the kids, because who better than the parent? Our oldest son would love to stay home. Now he's not married or anything yet, but he said, I'd love to stay home and raise the children if I found a wife who would be willing to work. I mean, it doesn't matter which parent, we're beyond that argument.
Yeah.
But the values we could pass on, the sense of family unity, grandparents living next door, how much would you pay to have your grandchildren within a 5-10 mile radius of your house?
Oh, we had that. We had that.
Priceless.
Both in my lifetime and my son's lifetime, where his grandparents actually were like his second mother and father. On the weekends, that left Denise and I a chance to go out and have dinner and go to a movie, and they would stay the night.
Right.
You know, and it was a fun time.
Exactly.
And so yeah, it does make a difference.
So my point is, this whole jobs issue, it's about recreating a quality of life that brings these millennials home. When I say millennials, there's a lot of young kids to us, 20s, 30s, who work with their computer 4 or 5 days out of the week, and research shows they're looking to relocate to a place with a quality of life. We have 4 distinct seasons. We have 3 scenic rivers. We have 2 ports. We have wonderful schools, family, park system, all that quality of life. We can draw our kids home, strengthen the family. Everybody wins.
Yeah. You know, I think a lot of times too, our society, which is different, even we grew up in a different time.
Yes.
In a simpler time. But I see a lot of young people. I fell for it. Michelle and I did too. We overinvested in a house that we really didn't need, and found ourselves financially strapped after about 5 or 6, 7 years. Had to get out of that situation and have cleared that situation up.
Yes.
But it took, because we're older, we could afford to do that and get over it. But these younger kids, they drowned in that, and it's hard to come out of that, and it's unfortunate.
When we were first married, looking for a house, you remember Jim Case from Jefferson?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Knew him well. The
Old
cowboy
Richard-
hat.
Yep, the voice of the fair
Yeah.
for kids. Great old friend of the family, and he took my wife and I out looking for houses, and he said something to us. He said, you don't want to be a slave to your house. Because we were looking at that nice house that we were going to build from scratch, and he said, you don't want to be a slave. You don't want to commit more than 25-30% of your gross to a house payment. Otherwise, you are caught in that house. And we took his advice. We have a modest home, we still live in it today.
Do you really?
And we were, yeah, still live in the same house. We were able to do things, vacations with our kids in Richmond,
Sure.
that we wouldn't have if the money was going into the house. Now, even though it's the same house, even that house is more than what my wife and I can handle. She said, good thing we didn't buy more. It's more to clean, more to take care of.
Yeah, now at our age, you
Yeah.
want to downsize.
Yeah.
Hi, you're on the air.
Morning, Pat. This is Earl.
Hi, Earl.
Hey, my question is, the citizens of Ohio voted that marriage is between a man and a woman. And what is this about this judge saying that Ohio has to recognize the gay marriage? I wasn't quite following what this is all about. You know, I'm really getting tired of this country, and when the citizens speak, nobody, it doesn't matter because the representatives don't stand up to this. And I'm hoping that the representatives of Ohio stand strong on this because, you know, it's a moral issue, and you know, and I know that there are so many religions in this country, but our country was built on Christian, on the Bible, and in the standards that the Bible has. So I don't believe that some groups should push their lifestyles on us. So if you could maybe touch on that, I'd appreciate it. So I'll hang up and listen.
Okay, thanks, Earl.
All right.
I can only try to get in the mind of Judge Black, who ruled that. So I'm going to give you the legal framework that he used, Pat.
Okay.
Okay? Ohio has laws regarding marriages between minors. And Ohio has laws regarding marriages with family members, and I'm talking first cousins now.
Okay.
Okay. Legally, Ohio recognizes marriages that have been taken out of state between minors. Now this is Judge Black, this is not John Patterson, this is Judge Black. This is his rationale.
Okay.
And likewise, Ohio has also recognized marriages between first cousins that can take place, or second cousins, I forget, but it was cousin, from out of state. So his thinking was, if we do that, because that marriage issue that Earl brings up have been legalized in other states, to be consistent, then in his court that was the idea, that we would also recognize gay marriage. That's the judge's rationale for it. Ohio passed a constitutional amendment 2002, 2003, and we live under Ohio law. So it's going to be interesting to see that tension between federal law, because Judge Black is a federal judge, and its application to the state of Ohio. And we'll just have to watch that and see how it unfolds. I don't have any idea how that's going to unfold, but I do know that that was his reading in the paper. I've never discussed it or talked to Judge Black, but that was his legal rationale.
Okay, there you go, Earl. John, interesting thing. We did an hour this morning, and
Oh my gosh, already.
yeah, and I learned a lot. Really, really good information. Hope to have you back in May.
Yes.
If we can.
Yes.
Aren't you on a break, or do you go on vacation or something? Did somebody? Somebody said, "Well, John will be able to show up in 1 month," and I don't know what month that they were talking about. Was it May or?
Theoretically, we're home 3 weeks now. Last week, this week, and next week.
Oh.
Supposedly our vacation. But you know me.
Yeah.
And this is a time that I use to continue to build relationships and to get involved with issues before our constituents.
Right.
So we'll be meeting throughout the rest of May then. And then I've looked at the schedule. It looks like June, July, August, we're going to be not in Columbus, which means everybody's going to be home to an election year. Governor's up,
Right.
statewide candidates. I'm going to be up. It's only a 2-year term. So they'll be out
Do
campaigning.
you have anybody running against you in the primary?
Nobody in the primary.
Nobody in the primary.
No.
Okay, cool.
So I will continue to be with you as often as you wish. And we'll
I
set
think
something up from
you're
there.
allowed. There's a FCC window where I think as we head into September,
Yes,
we are not
I
allowed
cannot.
to do that.
Right.
Debbie and some of the other candidates had to follow that.
Right.
But right up till September, we're good to go. So I'm counting on you every
I'll
month.
be here. I'll be here. It's important to keep the.
The
It's like
updates
a
are very
marriage,
good.
you know, with the communication falters, there are issues. Would you care to comment on that?
No.
Is she watching this morning?
Yes, she's home today, so I keep my mouth shut.
Yes, dear.
It gets in trouble.
Yes, dear.
I get in trouble for that stuff. All right, and Andy, this is a keeper. Okay, we would definitely want to rerun this, and even if it's in segments, because you covered a big span of different topics, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank
John.
you. Always a pleasure.